Guys, our next guest is second to none when it comes to fight analysis. You know his phenomenal work from his channel, Full Reptile, with the best fight previews, fight reactions, and live streams during the pay-per-views, as well as, of course, his great work on BT Sports with the Dan Hardy Breakdown Show, as well as many other great, excellent BT Sport fight and boxing programming that you guys can enjoy. He is kind enough to join us once again to talk shop late at night, by the way, from what looks like the red room in his house. Dan Hardy, welcome back to the show. Is this an extension of the Dan Hardy MTV Cribs episode that we so desperate to see? Is this a new room that you finally have us in? Is this the secret one?
This is the studio. This is where we do the podcasting. I've got the mics and stuff next to me here. I do the war rooms in here as well. So this is quite a multifunctional room. This one is, but I spend most of my day in here now.
I love it, man. I love it. Also, something we forgot to mention in the intro, you're nominated for Analyst of the Year at the World MMA Awards. So, as always, huge honor to have you on, man. Let's get straight into it because there's a lot of things we want to cover with you. The oblique kick, should it be banned? Or should people be killed just for even mentioning the oblique kick? That's the way it feels. In MMA at the moment, fighters have been obviously weighing in since Khalil Roundtree Jr.'s pretty awesome TKO win this past weekend over Modestas Bukakas. Heaps and heaps of fighters wanting it gone. Some people saying, Bilal Muhammad coming out and asking Dana White, please protect me. Where do you stand on this debate as a fighter yourself? And do you think it should be banned, Dan?
Absolutely not. It shouldn't be banned. It's an effective technique. If we start banning effective techniques, then we're going to find ourselves with a very, very limited rule set. I think we need to recognise that it's an occupational hazard. On football fields, rugby pitches, up and down the around the world, on a weekend basis, people are getting their knees destroyed in the same way that Modestas did. It happens very rarely in MMA. I mean, like anybody that says it should be banned, have them name 3 people that's happened to, because it is very, very difficult to recall any times when it actually happens in MMA. It's the same as knees to the head on the ground as well. For every now and then when they do land, there are so many times when they don't. It's one of those techniques that's very difficult to land. It's more beneficial to throw it earlier in the fight when the leg's a bit drier and those kind of things. But I mean, it's such a difficult thing to land in the first place. If you could stop a fight with it, then well done. I have no problem with it. We say it all the time. It's not a tickling contest. You're trying to take each other out. A knee injury is the least of your worries in there when you've got people throwing elbows and knees and spinning kicks at your head. Like, don't complain about fighter safety and talk about knee injuries, because people from all of the sports that suffer knee injuries all the time are not complaining. It's a silly thing to talk about. I can't even believe that it's being brought up as something that we should consider banning. It fries my brain, honestly, it does. And the fact that professional fighters would come out and say it, you're in the wrong sport. You're doing the wrong thing if you're concerned about picking up a knee injury. You know what you're doing when you get in there. You sign a death waiver when you're stepping in there to fight. Suck it up.
I love it. This is why we get you on, Dan. No words minced here. What do you think is something similar? Because obviously people say, it's either, career-threatening, career-altering, or it's going to, it could take you out for a long time, ACL repairs, 9 months, a year, something like that. What is something similar in your mind that you think, all right, well, that might be bad, but also there's a much more common injury or something else that happens in fights that, nobody's calling for to see banned?
I think that the most obvious injury, similar technique that causes injury is a heel hook. The thing is, obviously, there are certain rule sets and certain styles, certain competitions that take heel hooks out and stuff. But when it comes to a professional setting, you wouldn't want to not see heel hooks in MMA. But I guarantee you, if you took the statistics of, just pick one country, just pick the UK or the US or Australia, it doesn't matter. You round up how many people are injured on a weekly basis by heel hooks in mixed martial arts and by oblique kicks. Like, if we looked at those stats, we'd be talking about taking heel hooks out because of the knee damage. It's a part of the sport. Like, we are literally in there to try and take each other's head off. Like, you're not pulling punches. You're not thinking about about, you know, what the damage is doing to the person's brain when you're kicking them and elbowing them and those kind of things. I would much rather be dealing with a knee injury than a you know, a serious concussion. Like, they're the kind of things that we, you know, we really have to take into consideration. Like superficial damage, knee injuries, elbows, those kind of things, I have no problem with them at all. You know, it's a part of the sport. It's a part of the industry. It happens all the time in other sports. And you know, fight sports, first and foremost, is about destroying other human beings. Like, let's not water it down and sanitize it. Let's know it for what it is. It's professional violence. And that's why we love it so much, because it's, you know, it's on the edge of life threatening.
Yeah, and it's funny because in the MMA world, you know, first there was, for example, like the flying knee, and everybody's trying to do flying knees in the gym. And then there's the calf kick, and all of a sudden the calf kick's the popular thing. Now the oblique kick. And it's just funny how all these techniques obviously have been around for a long time, but how seasonal it is for some fans. Oh, I just saw this, and let's just talk about this one technique that's been around forever. And that, you know, we're all going to attempt at the gym now. Everything's going to be around, how do I use an oblique kick in my fights now, because I saw it in the UFC this past weekend. But I'm curious, though, because we've all been in the gym. You know, anyone who's sparred, there's always a guy that walks in there, even when you're doing some light sparring, and he loves to throw some oblique kicks at you, and you always get the coach going, don't go with that guy, he's the oblique kick guy. But at the end of the day, what is your theory on actually training for it? Because I suppose in training, you can't really throw it at 100%. But at the same time, especially if it's a guy that you know is going to be throwing it, a lot of guys use it, like Robert Whittaker. How do you prepare effectively for that technique without taking the risks of potentially hurting your knee in the training in the meantime leading into the fight?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned Rob Whittaker, because we need to remember the reason why Rob Whittaker became so good at that kick is because Yoel Romero used it against him in their first fight. Just talking about people copying from one to the next to the next. You know, it's the same with everything when it comes to sparring. You know, even the calf kicks can take you out for a couple of days if you sparring with someone that you don't trust and they start wailing in those calf kicks. We have to be careful with everything we do. It's the same with training elbows. You know, if we didn't train elbows carefully, we'd be opening each other up on a weekly basis. It's about understanding the placement of the technique, and it's about drilling it on a bag and on a pad and on a training partner or a coach that's working with you. You know, there are so many things that you can't really apply until you're full speed, you know, full contact fighting. And you know, elbows are a good example. Knees to the head are a good example. Sure, you can recognize in sparring if something may have landed, but then you've got to have that you know, honesty with yourself as well if you do get caught with something like that, because you can't realistically be taking those shots. And one other thing to mention as well, if you look at the targeting of Khalil's kick, it was right into the quadricep. It's exactly the same as the target that you would aim for with a you know, a regular Thai boxing low kick. It wasn't even aimed at the knee specifically. You know, you look at Jared Cannonier's kick against Anderson Silva that stopped that fight, and that was a low kick, but that was targeted far more towards the knee. I mean, you know, the target area is not the issue. The problem is the hyperextension of the knee. And that is down to A, the placement of the foot of the person receiving the kick, and B, down to whether that foot's planted on the floor and is able to be kicked in that way so it would collapse. You know, if you're on your toes, if you're light, if you're moving, if you're conscious that lead leg's a target, you shouldn't be able to get caught like that. That's why it's so rare. We see oblique kicks all the time in MMA. You know, in Savat, it's called a chasse kick. You know, the side kick, the hop side kick to the lead leg. It's a very effective technique, but it's difficult to land it and really do some damage with it. It's why we see it so rarely.
100%. And it's funny how you mentioned, well, Robert Whittaker learned from Romero, then he used it against Darren Till, put Darren Till out. And then we saw, obviously, Darren Till was out for a while, not so much because of the kick, but then he had the collarbone. And then he made his big return this past weekend. It was a great weekend for the Scousers. Molly McCann, Paddy Pimblett, Tom Aspinall's not a Scouser, but he did a phenomenal job as well. Darren Till, unfortunately, got rather dominated by Derek Brunson. So it brings up the question of sort of Darren and his ceiling. You know, people looking at his record and saying, well, you know, as it stands, his best wins today to Kelvin Gastelum and probably Wonderboy Thompson, both pretty close. Then you can throw in the Cerrone win. So people are really questioning what his future is and the ceiling. So based on what we've seen, where do you stand on Darren Till and I guess his future hopes, as far as ultimately achieving that dream that he wants to, which is being the UFC champion. Do you think he still can be one? And if so, what weight class do you think he has a better chance at doing at, Dan? Because a lot of people are saying, hey, why not move down to welterweight?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think moving back down to welterweight is the solution. Having seen him, first-hand fight week for the Wonderboy fight, he was not himself. He didn't look healthy at a media day. His lips were stuck to his teeth. He was gaunt. He was staring off into the distance. Middleweight's definitely the right weight class for him. We have to remember, he went straight in at the top of the division. He went straight in against Kelvin Gastelum. Then he's got Rob Whittaker. It's not like he's fighting middleweights. He's fighting the best guys in the world in that weight class. And we often forget, because Darren's he's so confident and he's personable, and people do want to invest in his journey. People also forget how young he is. We all we say, some of the best wins that he's got, Gastelum and Wonderboy in particular, they're a decent bit older than Darren. I think he's still got time. I think we need to maybe take the limelight off him a little bit. Give him something that's maybe not a co-main or a main event. Maybe give him someone that's not in the top 10 in the division and let him find his way back in. There are guys sitting outside the top 15 sitting outside the top 10 at middleweight right now. Guys like Chris Weidman. There are people around there that Darren Till could fight and could potentially have really good performances against. We are at the moment comparing him to the best guys in the division, and he never even found his feet at middleweight. He didn't even have any warm-up fights. He was straight in. And, even the Gastelum decision was a close one. Because it was a win, it was always going to be accelerated to the next level. And that's always going to get more and more difficult. I think he's still got time. That's the reality of it. I think he's a young man. He's still got time. I think he's got the skills, and I think he's got the knowledge. I just think he needs to flesh out his game so he's covering all the areas where he's vulnerable.
I think also worth noting is that this is probably physically the worst shape we've seen Darren Till. I mean, it just kind of brings up questions of what was going on in the camp. Was it maybe rushed? Maybe was everything not 100%? Because just from a physical standpoint, he's always in pretty good shape, and he just didn't seem it this time around.
Yeah, I mean, he was out for 14 months because of the collarbone injury, and then the current times that we're all living in, like, you have to bear in mind that these fighters, it's their job. If they're not fighting, they're not working. And I think there is some pressure that comes with that, especially when, you've been out for a while, there's gaps between fights, then you've picked up an injury. It's like, well, this is the date I've got to fight because this is what I do for work. This is what I do for money.
Israel Adesanya wants to fight you next. There's that carrot.
Well, there's also that as well. Obviously, there's the motivation of a lot of potential money being on the table, and you get in the head of yourself a little bit. And that might also be a part of the case with Darren. But I do think I think he looked a bit unsure of himself. I mean, he's always an aggressive starter, but he uses lots of feints. He's not reckless with it. But I think he was also respectful of Brunson's wrestling ability. I mean, it was a good performance by Brunson. It's exactly what you would expect him to do to win the fight. There were no surprises there. I don't think it would have gone one way or the other, and it wasn't Darren's night for whatever reasons that is. But counting him out is not, it's not the right time to do that. He's a young man, and he's coming off an injury. He's been out for a while. I think give him a bit of time, and make sure he gets back in there in the next sort of 4 months, so he's not out for too long. And he'll be back on track no time.
I mean, Casper mentioned it just before with the Israel thing, but do you think he was in a way a victim of this whole situation where he's such a big star and the UFC really want to see him in the position of being able to fight for a title, especially at the moment while Israel is the champion? Because stylistically, Israel and Darren Till is a fun matchup in the sense that it's a striking battle. And stylistically and build-up wise, that is a big fight for the middleweight division. Obviously Israel is like, get some wins, let's get this going. So in a way, is he a little bit of a victim of the circumstance, do you think, of his popularity, of the UFC trying to push him, that he didn't get the chance, like you mentioned, of getting warm-up fights in the middleweight division and sort of taking his time and building up, and then possibly even building up some of those skills that you mentioned he's got gaps in and lacking? before he makes it to the Derek Brunsons. And even though he put in a good performance against the Robert Whitakers, he's found himself in a position where he keeps getting put up against these guys who are the elite in the division.
I mean, anytime the champion pays attention to one of the contenders in the division, it makes that the life of that contender easier in some ways, because they to an extent kind of get a pathway paved for them, but it also puts targets on their back. Because like if Derek Brunson wants to get himself back to Adesanya, and Adesanya's talking about Darren Till, what's the easiest way to ruin that party is to take Darren Till out of the picture. I think Brunson's put himself in a very strong position by doing that. And I think Adesanya has opened himself up to a rematch with Brunson, which, to be honest, I don't think it'd look any different to the first one. But Brunson's now kind of upset the apple cart and put himself in this position. I think Darren's, he's a victim of his own success in some ways, but it's not necessarily success in the octagon so far. I mean, he has had some success, of course, but we know it's not quite what his potential is. We all hear him talk and listen to the confidence in his words, and we believe, we know that there's more to his career. After the loss, he tweeted or Instagrammed a photo of Michael Bisping and Charles Oliveira. That was a clear hint that, sometimes it's a journey, but we keep walking and we get there eventually. The one thing we have to remember about Darren Till is he is a martial artist. He's not in this for sport. He moved to Brazil to continue his pursuits of martial arts and keep himself out of trouble. But he was already well embedded in martial arts before he made that move. He's living the life of a martial artist, and I think if you do that honestly, you respect the fact that it's a process and sometimes there are dips in the road. I can't count him out. I mean, I'm disappointed that he didn't pick the win up, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be back in this circumstance in the next sort of 18 months and be able to make it look very different.
Yeah, 100%. And you can definitely see Darren Till stringing together one or two more wins and then being in the exact same position, like you mentioned, banging on the door of a title shot, if not getting the title shot, especially because of the fact that he's so young. But speaking of bringing things back, it's time to bring back some delicious cereal in your life, something that I had to give up for a long, long time as an adult. As a kid, I used to smash cereal all the time, all the delicious flavors, all the delicious brands, but they were too full of sugar. As an adult, trying to stay in relatively good, sexy shape, I had to get rid of it. Just too much sugar, too much bad stuff in there. Enter Magic Spoon, which gives you all the delicious flavors, all the delicious taste you remember as a kid, waking up, watching TV, eating a big bowl of cereal, or maybe eating a bowl of cereal as a snack in the evening because you couldn't be bothered making anything else. Now you can bring it back without the worry of sugar. Breakfast can be as fun as you remember it as a kid. Isn't that right, Dennis?
Yeah, man. Get your Jerry Seinfeld on. There is nothing better than having cereal for dinner. And with Magic Spoon, you can do just that. And how about this? 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, only 140 calories. They have little mazes at the back of the boxes, which is one of the things I loved, Cass, growing up, playing the little puzzles and doing the little mazes in the back. You guys can get the full experience, the full cereal experience with all the different flavors. How about the variety pack that has the cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter? It's all happening. They got other crazy great flavors like cookies and cream, maple waffle, cinnamon, and blueberry. I mean, life is basically different now, Cass, isn't it? I mean, there is color in life. It's no longer gray and black and white. And during lockdown, it is that sexy treat that you've been waiting for. Use the code word submission at checkout to get 5% off any order, or click the link below. Code word submission, magicspoon.com/submission if you're listening on the pod. Use that code word submission and get $5 off today.
That's right. Well, we're saving you some money if you are still shaving yourself with some kind of rusty spoon or rusty razor, making your junk look like a Nate Diaz fight after he beat Conor McGregor at UFC 196. Stop that immediately. Get yourself the best grooming tool on the market, the Lawnmower 4.0. I believe there's the same amount of engineering here as Steve Bezos' rockets into space. They crafted this thing so that it will never cut you ever again with the skin-safe technology. It's also got the 7,000 RPM motor, which is just beautiful power, more power than Francis Ngannou, but more delicate than a ballet dancer. It's got the LED light, so you can do it, in a cave or wherever you are. It's waterproof, so you can do it in the shower, nice and quick, and just get on with your life. It's got the travel lock as well, so that it doesn't go off in your bag when you're traveling and waste the battery on a 14-hour flight like Sydney to LA. It's really the perfect grooming tool, isn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, man. I mean, the thing about this is if you have your cheap groomers, you charge it all day long for it to only work about 15 minutes. With the Manscaped, you basically charge it, you put it in your bathroom, and it's ready to go for you. It's so handy when it's a last-minute groom right before you have to run out and do something. It's ready to go, and you don't have to worry about recharging it. Or the worst, which used to happen to me all the time, you're shaving your face, and then it dies halfway through the shave. Has that ever happened to you, Cass? It does through the shave. You got like a Hulk Hogan beard and you've got a meeting in 5 minutes, which has happened to me in the past.
You got a face like Kimbo Slice's chest back in the day.
Exactly. So, change life today with Manscaped. 20% off with a code word submission and free shipping. Get some Manscaped in your life and get ready for whatever life throws at you with Manscaped. But Dan, you mentioned the rematch between Adesanya and Brunson. You don't think it's going to look any different? Can you take us into that a little bit, Dan? Because do you believe it pretty much looks the same as their fight at UFC 230?
I think it might last a bit longer. I think Brunson might have a bit more success with wrestling. I mean, there are things about Izzy's game that do concern me. In recent fights, even in the Yan fight, I know, of course, he was outsized in that fight, but he still made technical errors on the floor, which I wouldn't want to see from my pro team and that are not nearly at the level of Adesanya. Just some simple things that he could have done better, positioning wise, building frames and keeping himself safer. So if he does get taken down, I do very much feel like Brunson can make his life difficult. And I talked about it in my breakdown show about Brunson's rear naked choke. I know he's not got a lot on his record, but he's found himself in that position quite a few times. Beats people up from top position, they turn their back, and he threatens the rear naked choke. I just feel Brunson's in a weird spot because obviously, he's kind of coming to the end of his career. I think he hinted the fact that if he lost to Till, he might retire anyway. So he's kind of, it's like now or never. But at the same time, he's just really started to learn striking. Although he's been an effective striker at earlier on in his career, when he had that, I think he had like a 5-fight win streak where he knocked out 4 guys in the first round. Yeah. Uriah Hall being one of them. He was effective because he was confident, not because he was good. And I think, he ran into Rob Whittaker. He learned that lesson in that fight, and he couldn't get it together against Anderson Silva when he fought him after. Now he's moved to Sanford MMA. It's like he started to learn striking and realized that he actually doesn't have great striking skills, and it's undermined his confidence in his striking. Like if you see him in his last couple of fights, he looks tentative, he looks nervous, because it's almost like he's seen behind the curtain and he recognizes guys like Darren Till and Rob Whittaker and Adesanya. They have a higher processing level when it comes to striking that Brunson's not been able to get his head around yet, which is why we've seen him gravitate back towards his wrestling. I mean, I actually think it's working out for him because it's made him realize that he's a wrestler and not a striker. But at the same time, it's undermined his confidence in his striking. And the problem that he had against Adesanya first time around is Adesanya was able to stop his takedowns. And immediately his confidence fell out of his ass. And then he was panicking. He was chasing him and trying to take him down. And Adesanya was running him onto knees. His confidence is in the balance. And the new striking training that he's done has kind of undermined his previous striking confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude, that's fascinating. That's fascinating insight. The way you describe him reminds me almost like a Glover Teixeira, like not 2.0, but like kind of like Glover, later on in the career, going back to his wrestling and sort of having a more, safe and statistical kind of style that's, getting him a lot of success. Like that movie, Dennis, what's the one, baseball, Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill?
Moneyball. He's the Moneyball of MMA.
Yeah, the Moneyball of MMA, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, still a few other things we want to talk to you about. So we'll jump straight over to obviously Paddy Pimblett, who everybody is very excited about. He had his very, very long-awaited UFC debut this past weekend against Luigi Venturimi. But obviously, it was a great win. It was a great debut, he got basically robbed because it wasn't in front of the London crowd. I can't imagine what that would have been like if it was in the O2. It would have been just madness. But he did get hit quite a few times. He has his chin in the air, something that everybody noticed. So I'm wondering, what's your gauge on Paddy as a prospect? And, you know, as far as the ceiling on him as well, what do you think, Dan?
I'm excited for him for a few different reasons. You know, a few years ago when he was coming through Cage Warriors and he had a couple of rough fights, he didn't look like he was taking it very seriously. He didn't look like a professional athlete. He looked like a young boy, to be honest. I mean, if you look back to his Cage Warriors debut, he looks like a kid. And I just, at the time, I didn't think he had the focus or the determination or the desire, to be honest, to be in the UFC and to be doing this full time as a job. And then when the UFC came to Liverpool and he turned down a contract, that kind of sealed my mind. I was like, okay, well, he wants to be a Cage Warriors star in Liverpool, and that's kind of, he's happy with his lot. And I was wrong. You know, I was very wrong. He waited for the right time because he knew he wasn't ready. He's invested heavily in his strength and conditioning, and he's grown physically into a lad. You know, he's an athlete now, and I think that the skills that he had previously, they needed that strength and that physicality to complement them, because he is chaotic, he is wild. You know, the reason he's not been caught with a clean punch on the chin is because he covers distance so quickly with so much confidence. I was having this debate with my Raptors the other day, and they were like, yeah, but he always runs in with his chin in the air and someone's going to catch him. And it's like the perception is that now he's got to the UFC, that everyone in the UFC is going to have that perfect timing to run him onto a right hand. And the truth is, confidence goes a long way. And the one thing that you can't question when it comes to Paddy Pimblett or Molly McCann, you might watch their eyes through your eyes, if through your hands if you're a fan, but it's determination and confidence. It's the belief that they will not get knocked out and they'll eventually find a way to get to their opponent. And you know, the skills can grow underneath that. Certainly, Paddy's not ready for a lot of the guys in the division. And my concern is he might get the Till treatment. You know, I mean, I was fighting for a world title after 4 fights. I don't want to see that for Paddy. It would be too soon because you know, he has a lot of growing to do. Like at this stage, with this so much hype and so much buzz behind him, if he gets caught clean on the chin by someone at his early stage, he's gonna fall off a cliff, and that might rock his confidence to the point where he might not even get back in the gym. I think we need to treat this, you know, as a budding career for a young fighter. You know, he's arrived in the UFC. He's very exciting. There's a lot of good matchups for him, but there are a few guys in the division that would clean his clock with that kind of style. And you know, we need to understand that there are different tiers in the UFC. You know, it's not everybody in the same bag and we shake them up and pull 2 out. You know, there are guys that have cut their teeth at the top of the division for the last 5-10 years. And there are guys that are just joining. You know, we don't want to get those journeys crossed. I like Paddy. I think he's got a lot of potential, but there is also a lot of growth in his game that still needs to happen in order to be competitive. And we have to remember, he's at lightweight. He's at 155. It is the deepest of shark tanks in the UFC.
It's fascinating because, like you mentioned, the UFC just see money signs all around him. So I'm wondering, how big of a star do you actually think he could be? Because we saw just after the weekend, he's already got a pretty big social media following. Like Instagram banned him. He started a new account with like 20,000, and now I think he's close to 500,000 followers on Instagram alone. He's got the personality. How big of a star do you think he can be? And what do you think of him already having these sort of interactions with Conor McGregor and them having, not back and forth, but already sort of starting to recognize each other? Him mentioning that, hey, this is the fight for Anfield down the track. What do you think of all of that already happening so soon?
I think it proves the point that he has got that extra bit of something that most fighters don't have. You know, for someone like Conor to recognize that in him and recognize it a few years ago as well. I mean, they've been aware of one another for a time. And also to have followed through the Cage Warriors' footsteps and have held the belt that Conor used to hold. I don't really see a limit to Paddy's potential. Certainly not his fame. I mean, you know, you've got Sean O'Malley over in the US doing his thing. Paddy Pimblett over here is going to be just as popular. Like he's a unique character. People are going to want to know what he's doing on a daily basis. He's always got something funny to say. He's always got a smile on his face. And I'll be honest, I mean, I've been at a lot of his fights live at Cage Warriors. He brings a different demographic. He brings a different audience. You know, a lot of the events I've been to in the UK, you've got, you know, like the guys that, you know, they were at football during the day, and now they've met up with their mates. They've had a couple of beers, and now they're at the fights. Now they're gone cage fighting. You know what I mean? It was that kind of demographic, and I love those guys. But they're at every show. It's that same type of audience. Paddy Pimblett brought in a group of guys that all had, well, say guys, they're kids. You know, they were ranging from sort of 8 years old up to sort of 18. They all had the same haircut and the same jacket, and they were rowdy and they were dancing, they were singing. But when he won, there was almost a riot, and it lasted about 15 seconds, and then they put everything back. and I remember it stood out to me because like there were railings that had been knocked over and chairs had gone scattered and everything like this, and they literally all let this bunch of 15-year-old kids all look like Paddy Pimblett just reorganizing Cage Warriors for us. It's a very different demographic, and I think he's gonna hit another generation of MMA fans, and not to liken him to Jake Paul, but a bit like that. He'll bring a new set of eyes to the sport.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, the Paddy Pimblett effect. We even like in our boys groups, like the WhatsApp groups, where all the shit gets talked. We're all joking and like photoshopping Paddy's hair on each other and stuff, sending that around. I hope this isn't a sign that the UFC kind of rush him because they're like, wow, look at all this attention. We got to get him in these main events. It's like you said, let's just slow things down, let him grow. And then you were speaking about how confidence will get you a long way. Obviously, he's got certain things that he needs to work on, in training. With him having his chin in the air, how far do you think that can get him in the division? Like, do you think he can make it, all the way to, say, the title without fixing that? Or is that something that has to be fixed before he, he finds himself in that elite level? Like, I just think of, say, a matchup against, I don't know, Justin Gaethje, for example, who crazy striker, crazy knockout power, very, very good takedown defense. At the moment, obviously, I would favor Justin Gaethje, so I wonder how necessary it is for him to fix that, and also how easy it is to fix. On one hand, he's very young. On the other hand, you see some fighters, go their whole career and not, fix the habits that plague them.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, my perfect example was it was in the main event. I mean, Derek Brunson's never fixed his striking. He's just started to fix his striking, and what is he? I think he's 37. And he got away with charging forward with his chin in the air. But then, to counter myself, Derek Brunson's never been the champion. And the reason for that is probably because, that small flaw in his game is the thing that's cost him when he got to that final hurdle, whether it was against, Robert Whittaker or Adesanya or whoever. It definitely needs fixing. I mean, it's, one of the first things that you learn in martial arts, in boxing and kickboxing is keep your chin down, tuck your chin. I'll say it 100 times at sparring tomorrow morning and people still won't do it, but I'll keep yelling it at them. I think he can get a long way. And the more success he has, the further he'll get because that confidence will carry. But there's always a Justin Gaethje or a Michael Chandler, someone that can just walk you straight onto a power punch. And they're far more frequently found in the lightweight division. And I would also say lightweight is really where that's kind of speed and power meet. I mean, it's like salt water and fresh water coming together. You've got speed of the lighter weights and the power of the heavier guys. And I think around sort of 155, 170 is where it meets, is where they both come together with devastating force. Speed's always a benefit, but you've got to make sure you're not running onto stuff. But I would like to see him correct it sooner rather than later, because he's got the tenacity. If you give him some good footwork and some good boxing skills, he's going to walk people down and beat them up because he's got that kind of mindset. And if he can complement that with his good submission skills as well, he can absolutely go all the way. You just don't want him to get caught being reckless like Brunson did when he fought Whittaker.
Yeah, no doubt. But then also on the flip side of things, people need to, because I think a lot of people are like, hey, have him lower his chin. And I think you're absolutely correct on that, Dan. But I think he uses that as a part of his attack because as a lot of people know, when you land that shot on someone, they're moving forward, chin up, and they're still there. It's mentally, for the guy that lands the shot, that can be a killer for him in the fight. Like, that could take all your confidence away. And here comes a guy with a strong chin who's got his chin up in the air. And I know a lot of his confidence and his striking is about coming in with that chin up. So I hope they're able to do that, make the changes. But also, we've seen guys, when they make those modifications, lose some of that confidence out of the game with some of the swagger that makes them so effective. So it's going to be an interesting balancing act for him when he does that. So many guys in the gym that love to do that, though. I wonder how many people in the gym on Monday are doing the Paddy chin up in the air in training. There'd be a lot of Dan Hardys yelling at them right now through the ring ropes. What are you doing? Put it down. But I want to knock him out. I want to look good doing it. Speaking of the circus that you mentioned, Jake Paul before and all of his fans, the boxing circus continues this weekend because we've got Anderson Silva boxing Tito Ortiz at 195 pounds, Dan. 195 pounds. Tito Ortiz looking like he's cutting off a leg trying to make weight right now. What is your gauge on this fight coming up this weekend? That's had to basically switch locations and all sorts of crazy things.
I'll be honest, I love it. I love it because, I have the same opinion with all these kind of crazy boxing matches as I do with all the new Star Wars stuff. And all the purists that say, they shouldn't make any more Star Wars movies, it's all the original trilogy and stuff. It's like, all right, if you like the original trilogy, if you like your original boxing and your mixed martial arts and your Muay Thai, then stick with them. But I watch some freak fights. I watch some weird stuff. I don't mind. And this, it's not even that weird, is it? Let's be honest. It's Anderson Silva against Tito Ortiz. That could have happened in MMA years ago. Anderson Silva's going to light him up, let's be honest. I mean, I remember training with Tito a while ago, and he's just a big side of beef, let's be honest. I mean, he's a great wrestler, but his striking's always been atrocious. I think Anderson's going to light him up. I think Anderson's going to make him look really slow and really silly. I'm more interested to see what happens with Vitor Belfort and Evander Holyfield. Like, holy what? I don't even understand how that's happening. And Vitor Belfort looks like he stepped out of the 1990s again.
I know.
I'm not sure.
He's found it again.
he's found something in his medicine cabinet. I'll tell you that. I don't mind it at all. These guys are getting paid. They're having fun. People are watching it. Combat sports is topics of conversations in circles that it wouldn't normally be. That's good for everybody. You can't hate on this. Anybody that's making money from fist fighting, I'm all behind it.
Yeah, 100%. Anderson versus Tito is not the weirdest shit we've watched on the internet. Let us just say that. But I was going to say, I guess it's like a balancing act, right? Because I like to see fighters get paid. I enjoy the freak show fights, but I guess anytime someone's asking you to put down your pay-per-view dollars, there's got to be a certain level of intrigue. I don't think there is that much there with Anderson and Tito, as you just said. Anderson is Anderson. We kind of already know what's going to happen. I wonder, as a fighter, can you tell, when you look at certain, fighters will never say, I'm doing this for a payday. It's always I love competing. I love this. I just, want to have fun, et cetera, et cetera. As a fighter, can you see and go, this guy's clearly just doing it for a payday, and distinguish between someone who's you know what? Someone like yourself, Dan, who I get the sense if you returned, it would be more about unfinished business, something that you genuinely want to do. Of course, pay would be a big factor as well. Whereas I think sometimes it's just hey, somebody's hurting for money and they really need to fight in order to, sustain themselves.
Especially in boxing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think pay is a factor for some people because you've got to be able to justify taking the time off your other projects. I mean, if I'm going into contract negotiations to fight again, I've got to take into account, where income would be lacking if I stopped doing this and stopped doing that and, started passing jobs on to other people. So that's one thing you have to take into account. I think Anderson's just doing it because he loves competing, though. I think he likes direction in his training, and I think live combat is the only way to really get the most out of your martial arts training. And Anderson's at the level where he needs it. I think Tito just likes people talking about him. I think he likes popularity, doesn't he? He likes the limelight. He likes attention. I think a big part of that is Tito. I think he's seen all this that's going on, the circus, and thought back to himself, I remember being, talking to town and everyone talking about the hunting the beach bad boy and everyone bleaching their hair white and stuff. And I think he misses it, wants to be a part of it. I think that's the same thing with De La Hoya as well. I don't, obviously Dana's had his jab about him being, having an expensive habit and all that, but I think he misses their limelight. I think he misses the attention, and that's understandable as well. I mean, of course it is addictive, but you don't want someone in there just for that. That can be a very motivating factor. But I think if somebody's in there just for the attention, I think that's when it gets a bit dangerous, and that's when you start seeing their trash talk not getting backed up with a good performance when they talk up a storm and then they get in there and realize they actually don't want to be there.
It's difficult because you look at guys like De La Hoya, and mentally, because their whole life they fight, and mentally they condition themselves to go through training, and it becomes like a highlight of their life. When that's over, you could see there's a huge gap in their life that they can't fill, and it's so hard for them mentally. But then also on the flip side of the coin, you got guys like Tito Ortiz, who, by the way, like, all criticism aside, how crazy is it? In 2021, Tito Ortiz is still co-headlining a pay-per-view, and he was around back in the day still doing this thing. So credit to him for that. He's got a lot of time to kill after the whole mayor thing anyway, and probably a lot of anger to dish out after some of those press conferences that we've seen online, which are like Curb Your Enthusiasm episodes. But just quickly, Dan, before we wrap, man, I got to get an update on you, because obviously fans want to see you make your comeback. Are we any closer to seeing any kind of announcement? And have you narrowed in on exactly what kind of comeback you'd want to make? Would it be a boxing, kickboxing, MMA? Where are you at right now?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got a few options.
What do you got? Why are you laughing? What are you doing? Is there a porn debut?
Well, because I've been having emails going back and forth today, and like every now and then I think to myself, oh, this seems like the right path. Then something else shows up, and I'm like, maybe that's a good shout. Look, I mean, the most likely route is that I'm going to fight John Wayne Parr at Muay Thai in one championship. That's what I want. That's my main focus. I'd like John Wayne Parr, then I want to move on and fight Nikki Holskin. I'm in contact with the matchmakers as well as a few other people in that organization, talking a whole bunch of different jobs. So there's lots going on there. But fighting is definitely, is definitely a priority there. I want to get over there. I want to get Jimmy Warled over there as well, and get him a couple of fights before he calls it a day, because he's looking like a monster right now. So that's what's most likely. I think cage Muay Thai in one championship, maybe a kickboxing match against Nikki Holskin, depending on the rules that he wants. And then I will consider MMA as well. But I have also got, I've had the bare knuckle guys reach out to me. I know Diego Sanchez wants a piece in bare knuckle. I don't know why he would want my knuckles bouncing off his soft, delicate face, but he seems to. He actually called me out personally. So if I can take a few layers of skin off his face, I will do. But that might be happening. That'd just be a one-off though, because I'm not mad interested in having a career in bare knuckle. I'd do it if it was the right person, and I'd love to punch Diego Sanchez in the face. So. That'd be a good option. There's also a couple of boxing options as well, but until the right opponent's offered that really kind of tantalizes me, then I'll wait. Maybe if Tito beats Anderson Silva this weekend, I'll fight Tito. I'd fight Tyron Woodley if he fancies it as well. He looked like a sack of shit the other week. That was very embarrassing.
What happened there? Do you? Because a lot of people are saying, Woodley threw that fight. Do you believe it was just Jake being able to use the jab and Woodley not wanting to work on the inside and sort of not being active enough to capitalize on the opportunities that were presented to him?
I wish it was as complicated as that. I think you're doing them too many favors there. I think Jake Paul's not very good. And I think he did what he could to minimize the damage that he would take from Woodley in the early rounds, and then played a smart game throughout the later rounds. And I think he knew that was the way to beat Woodley, which is why he accepted the fight. And I think Tyron Woodley was being himself. How many fights have the fans been booing in the third, fourth, and fifth round? He hangs back, he waits because he's got 10 punches in his pocket, and if he throws any more than that, he's blowing out of his arse. Like, that's the reality of it. He was always going to be gun shy because he's more afraid of getting tired and getting embarrassed by a YouTuber. Like, that was exactly what I expected to happen. And the reason I'm annoyed about it is because he validated exactly what I thought was going to happen. And I expected more from him. Like, dude, he's like, you're nearly 40. Like, your rap game's not going anywhere. Your MMA career's done. Like, you've got a guy in front of you that's been trashing your mom, that's been talking a whole heap of nonsense for how many months, and you've got 8 rounds to punch him in the face, and you already half punch him through the ropes, and then you don't put your foot on the gas because you're afraid of being vulnerable. That just looks weak to me. It looks weak, and it wastes people's money. And I love people. I love all these weird, wonderful fights, but that's when it runs out of steam. Like that's when the fire burns out, is when people tune in and they see that shit show and they go, oh, I won't get it next time because I'll expect the same thing. I'd rather watch Askren get knocked out again than watch that, And Askren wasn't there to win. We all know that. I think what's even worse is that Woodley was there to win and he didn't try. And that must burn him. That was burning him in the post-fight interview. Like, he couldn't barely contain himself without calling him out before he'd finished his interview. It was like, dude, you've missed your opportunity. Shut the fuck up and sit down and go and find something else to do, because you've just had your opportunity and it passed you by. And Jake Paul, fair play to him, because he is playing the game. He is mugging off the MMA world left, right and center. And he's raising some really interesting topics about fighter pay. So I'm finding myself more and more a Jake Paul convert by the day. I still don't think he's a very good boxer, though.
Who would have? I know, but I was thinking that, the other day as well. Like, Jake Paul was the face by the end of the fight,
Yeah.
Had the win, said some nice things, gave Tyron credit, and then Tyron's like, take the rematch right now or you're a coward. And everyone was like, what? What are you talking about?
Exactly.
And doesn't he need to get a tattoo anyway? Wasn't the bet that he was going to get the tattoo if he lost? I'm confused with this whole. Now he's only wants to get the tattoo if he gets a rematch. The whole thing's really. You made a bet. You gotta cop it. You gotta just get.
Who interests you more, Dan? By the way, we'll let you go in a second. But if now I know what you mean by you have all these options. If you could say do Diego, I know you got John Wayne Parr. That's the main one. But if you could do Diego Sanchez or Tyron Woodley, which one interests you more?
Oh, Woodley for sure. Definitely Tyron Woodley. Gloves or no gloves, I'm not bothered. It's not about the rule set. It's about the opponent. I like Diego. I feel kind of sorry for him. Like, if he was in the gym, I'd pull my punches. But he called me out on DM, and then he contacted the bare knuckle guys, and they've contacted me saying, "Hey, Diego wants to fight you." That's like slapping someone in the face with a glove in medieval times England. Like, if I see him in the street, I'm having words with him. So that's a one-off. I mean, I'll sign that contract right now and fight Diego at whatever weight he wants to do. I'm not bothered. My weight's coming down now. I'm below 200 pounds. I'm starting to move towards fight shape. But my goal is 170 for John Wayne Parr. I want to be respectful enough of him and his career to make his weight class. But I'll fight anybody on the way down. Diego Sanchez, Tyron Woodley, whoever wants it. Vitor Belfort, if he comes to Evander Holyfield. I'd even fight Anderson Silva, but not in any way out of disrespect, but just to be able to share a space with him like that. I've already sparred with Tito. He's too easy to hit, but I'd fight him again if the money was right.
Man, so many exciting options. And guys, don't forget, this is your last chance to vote for the man for the MMA World Awards. What an incredible job you've done, Dan.
I'm not getting that.
Oh, come on,
come on, man.
Let's all
voted for you last night, Dan. It's going to happen.
You've got to be on American TV to get that vote. That's how it works. We all know this.
Yeah,
it's been the same every year. I appreciate them nominating me. I really do, but I don't expect for a second for if voting changed anything to make it illegal. I know that's more linked to politics, but I think it still fits here.
Get your VPN provider out and just start voting for Dan Hardy today. Of course, follow the Russians on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Hardy MMA. Of course, YouTube Full Reptile, absolutely killing it. The Dan Hardy Breakdown Show, the War Room, his book Full Reptile. And again, don't forget to vote. Dan, appreciate you so much, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Always great to talk to you.